Discover the Women in Tech Trailblazers podcast, hosted by Tiffany and Jordan Franklin. Here, the complexities of being a woman in the tech industry are unraveled through discussions on key issues, personal growth, and how to succeed despite systematic challenges. It's a source of empowerment and inspiration for all women at all stages of their tech careers. We are back for another episode. Super excited to be here with all of you guys. And again, we have an incredible guest for you. We have Hagan Kappler here today. And I'll tell you, you are in for a treat. She has an incredible story, an incredible amount of energy, and is really passionate about what we are here to talk about today. So we are going to talk about entrepreneurship. So when we talk about technology, it's not always just in a corporation or in a company. That touches anything and everything that we do. And Hagan has a really incredible story and how she's kind of navigated through entrepreneurship. And then how do you really do that on your own terms is what we're here to talk about. So just a brief overview on Hagan. Hagan Kappler is the founder and CEO of Daisy, the first national brand in smart space installation and services. Prior to Daisy, Hagan was the CEO of Threshold Brands, a private equity-backed home and commercial services company with 9 brands, over 550 locations. And prior to Threshold, Hagan led ServiceMaster Clean and Mary Maids, a $1 billion plus home and commercial services business with thousands of franchisees across the globe, and supported the $1.6 billion sale of the ServiceMaster brands to Rourke Capital. Hagan led corporate development at Ingersoll Rand and Train, a $23 billion HVAC and industrial company, and she led the launch of Blonde Roast at Starbucks. Thank you for that. She has extensive strategy and M&A experience, including McKinsey and Company, as well as Goldman Sachs. Hagan holds a bachelor's degree in history from Williams College and an MBA from the Darden School at the University of Virginia. And Hagan has 4 beautiful children and lives in Newport Beach, California. Welcome to the show, Hagan.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's awesome to be here.
Woo, that was a great intro. I always like to kick off our podcast with welcome to the show. And also, I'm kind of setting our purpose of our podcast. And we're really trying to dig in and talk about topics that matter to girls and women in technology, bring awareness to many topics that are really never, ever talked about, and really release that authentic self across the space. So with our first question, it's always, what does authenticity mean to you?
I love that question. For me, it's just, allowing you to be yourself. I don't think that necessarily, you still have to do the work. I still had to, go from being a history major at Williams College, where I knew nothing about business, certainly did not know anything about investment banking. So that didn't mean I could be kind of goofy and, silly at work. I still had to dig in and learn, but I could lean on, my ability to connect with other people. I could lean on my ability to enjoy, other people's company. I understood how to take data and tell stories. That's what being a history major is all about. That's what the liberal arts programs are all about. And so I think part of it is, not taking for granted what your strengths and what your skills are, and making sure that you're leaning into those and not being afraid just because you're different from other people to kind of lean into those differences. And so, that's where being, the only kind of woman in a room in business and certainly in technology, can be, very difficult. It can sometimes be, even dangerous, but there are times too where I'm just kind of like, hold on, I don't have to be like all of these people. By being myself, by being so different, kind of can set me apart and actually, put me ahead. So I think that for me, just being myself and leaning into that, but then also, not being afraid to kind of like I said, like you have to still do the work, go through kind of the ropes to get where you want to be.
I absolutely love that. And I will say you have an incredible journey. So I know I read out your bio, but you have an incredible journey. And I think probably my interest wasn't the only one that's piqued as I looked at I named some of those brands and how you made that journey. Talk to me a little bit about your journey and really Talk to us, like, what inspired you to pursue the path that you're on? Or, was it in the beginning that you thought maybe at some point I'd want to do entrepreneurship? Did that hit you further down the line? What did that look like for you?
Throughout my career, when I was at McKinsey and I was advising companies on business issues, it struck me that I wanted to be kind of where the action was in any given company, so most of the time it is with the customer, right? And so for me, that I always knew that I wanted to, own a P&L. And so I think the more times I got into those types of roles, you just kind of want more of that ownership. And so whether it was, working for a bigger P&L for a public company, whether it was taking on a big P&L, but for a smaller company, whether it was being a CEO, which I thought, oh, great, I am a CEO now, I've made it, but it was owned by a private equity company. So I was like, okay, they own the company. So I'm following, their playbook still, which is fine. I'm very good at, following somebody else's rule book. But on the other hand, it was kind of like, well, what about all of my ideas, And again, that was fine because I learned so much along that journey. I couldn't have gone, for me, I know a lot of people do, and they do really well at it, but for me, I needed to learn and go through all those different stages to ultimately be able to set out on my own and own my own company with the support of investors. And I have a co-founder. But at some point it was like, okay, I want more and I want more. And the way that my path worked to get there, and I think for a lot of women, unfortunately, you kind of have to do that, right? It's not so much, I think Sheryl Sandberg calls it, it's not so much, climbing a ladder. It's like a jungle gym. You have to kind of look to see, okay, well, who will appreciate me and who will, have an opportunity there at some other company and take that kind of chance on me that maybe a larger company who wants me to follow that traditional role. I found myself a little bit, I was fine going through, like I said, going through the ropes and taking on one challenge after, and I never felt prepared for any of my roles. I always felt like, oh shit, they've made a mistake. I am not in the right role. And I'm like Google searching when people are asking me questions, like on my first day of work, like, let me think about that. And Google searching, what's the answer to that question? But I still wanted to be pushed and felt like I needed to, it's at times in my career, make jumps to get there.
I love that you said that even every time you moved careers that you really had to Google search or you were pushing yourself because it's known. I'm in the HR industry, so where I'm coming from, but it's known that women won't go after roles that they don't feel like they're 90% already there, right? And I love that you're saying you went for the roles knowing you didn't have all the answers, but could find them, right? We all have access to the tools to find the answers. I love that. So in this career journey, do you feel like you ran into any bias or gender bias kind of coming up through the ranks, doing the jungle gym? What was your experience with that?
Absolutely. I came across it all the time. And like I said, on the other hand, I think there are times where I use my gender as an advantage. I think that there's times when I think I'm one of the best negotiators just because of my ability to kind of connect with people in a way that's different. I think that I can understand consumers better just because I think men often forget that women are making up at least half the time, the decision making, in my case, in the home. But I think, often that voice, can be, ignored. Even today, I'll find that I'll mention something or have an idea and, 3 weeks later, a man will say the same thing and everyone will jump on that idea. Now, maybe it had to set in or soak in or, but it's been, super interesting to me to see that there's just completely a different kind of response sometimes to how I present ideas and how I'm listened to versus, some of my male peers, even today. And then I think the bias can be, as we know, conscious and unconscious. And I think that there have been times when I've certainly not been treated fairly. Certain roles where I took on for a man and was paid significantly less because I was younger was the excuse, even though my expectation to deliver in that role was much more. That seemed quite unfair. And I think gender, certainly played a role. I get asked a lot of questions about my kids, and I'm happy to talk about my kids, especially if it will help other women who are trying to navigate having kids and working. Because certainly throughout my career, I've questioned, okay, how am I going to balance this and how will I make that work? And I've had to have mentors kind of, almost like push me back in and help me figure that out. But on the other hand, it's like, I just know for a fact, no one asked my husband as many times, if any times, how do you do it with 4 kids? So why do people always have to bring that up with me? It starts to kind of really get on you. And that piece feels like it's so obvious to me that we're trying to point out that, there's a weakness that I clearly have, other things to do, other things on the brain. And so those types of, kind of comments, whether they're micro or bigger aggressions, they just kind of tend to wear on you over time. The other question I get a lot is, how is it being a female CEO, especially in my industry where there aren't really any, women CEOs in the smart tech, smart home installation space. And it's like, I get it. It's fine to ask that once or two times, but it's like, I don't know how to, it is what it is. I wake up every day, I eat breakfast, I run my company, what are you trying to,
you're a woman.
Yeah.
It's like, what is it like being in this other universe? Nope, we're all here.
Yeah, like, you mean, how do I deal with my frailty? How do I deal with crying every day? How do I deal with every month I have to, deal with some issue that men don't have to deal with? I mean, what are we trying to talk about here? And so on the one hand, it's like, it is a constant struggle because I know that that there is kind of almost like this inherent kind of looking at me like, oh, I wonder how she's going to do it. And, when she'll fail or if she'll fail. And again, that doesn't happen for my male peers.
I often find it's very interesting. I get asked questions similar, not exactly the same, but I get asked questions too, because people see what they see like on LinkedIn or whatever. And I think more than anything, your response to it is actually what they're looking for and after. Like, I actually, believe it or not, get asked this a lot. Do I cook? And I think they're like waiting for, because the reality is like, I think they're waiting for us to like go evaluate that. Yeah, no, like I can cook. I don't love it. And my husband does. So the answer is no, like he cooks dinners, because I think it's like they're ready for like the resistance or like, I don't know, us almost even shaming or judging ourselves of like, oh my God, am I supposed to be cooking? No, I'm not. Because you know what? I'm busy doing incredible things. And my husband likes to cook. So guess what? I don't, that's the answer. And I don't feel bad about it. So I think the confidence in like how you answer that, even when it is like all these other like things that we can't control, is super powerful. And women watching other women do that. Because again, like our nature is probably like inherently to like shrink back a little bit and think like, oh my God, should I be cooking dinner? Like, am I a bad wife? Like, am I a bad mom?
Right.
Or whatever. But yeah, it's interesting. So, okay, entrepreneur, you talked to us a little bit about your journey. Entrepreneurship on your own terms is, in my opinion, very different than just like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And I know this is like what you're super passionate about. So talk to me a little bit about like, what does entrepreneurship on your terms mean to you? And really like, how did you shape your journey around your personal values and lifestyle goals?
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, Women in Technology of Northwest Arkansas and Gumption at my-gumption.com for their support. Their contributions are critical in bringing these meaningful conversations to you. Stick around for more engaging discussions right after this break.
I think one of the most helpful and important parts of my journey, and I mentioned it briefly, has been having wonderful mentors and having people who believed in me more than I believed in myself. I can't say that this whole time I've been, knowing that exactly where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. On the other hand, now that I'm in this role, and doing and owning this company and running this company, there's no question I'm like I'm having the most fun of my life. I'm so confident that we're on such a wonderful path, and I love my team. But it's because I've had all of this, these experiences and coaching and development over the past, 25 years. But about 11 years ago is when I met my mentor, who is now my co-founder in Daisy. And so Deanne and I worked together at Ingersoll Rand. We created a strategy function for the company. He left the company. That's when I ran M&A for IR. That's when I was working on, digital strategies and technology within, a bigger company. And so my experience with technology has always been enabling, other companies. So companies that already existed, and how do we make them more efficient, or how do we improve the customer experience? And the same was true at Threshold Brands, where then I moved on to be CEO. And then I had, before I was CEO, I followed Deanne again to Memphis, of all places, and spent time not working for him, but kind of side by side with some of these home services brands. And then we got to work together, selling in other companies. So I had all of these experiences working with him, learning from him, and we just kind of got to know each other's style really well. So by the time we came up with this idea, which was 2 years ago now, we got to a place where, I had all of these experiences. They blended really well with his experiences. He's just kind of, one of the most brilliant kind of M&A strategists in the world. And so the fact that I got to, work with him and partner with him on this idea, and then start this company together, blending our experiences, I think that helped to give me the confidence to say, okay, I'm not going to go kind of the traditional route anymore. I'm going to, take this leap. Because once you do this, it's going to be really hard to go off and go back to, a traditional like strategy role working for, a public company again. It's just, once I've seen kind of what freedom tastes like, this is just too much fun, right? But I have to say, I think that's maybe something that people maybe, like I said, I'm sure there's a lot of people who, venture off and do this on their own, and it's totally by themselves. But I think most people, there's someone behind the person, or there's a team behind the person. And very quickly, we've compiled this amazing team that works together with us. And it's a combination of men and women. And part of our company is about, a big part of it, and why we named it Daisy, was trying to get to who that end consumer is, and knowing that she's most likely a woman who's trying to figure out the technology in her home. And so that's really one of the like differentiators of the company. But so I guess that's kind of the idea here with, like taking the leap. It was for me and for my family a risk, and, most startups fail, and most female founded startups fail to get venture. I've never raised money before, but we were successful in raising $35 million in 12 months. So that helped us to be able to buy 14 companies in 14 months. So, we're kind of off and running, and now we're the leading player in the marketplace. So I think with someone kind of behind you who supports you and, challenges you, I think that for me has been something that's really been helpful. Man or woman, honestly. I wish it had been a woman. I wish I could say it had been a woman. But in my case, it's been this person who now, look, it's led to this wonderful venture.
Well, kudos to you, because
thanks.
I am going through the funding round right now, and it is not for the faint of heart.
Oh, I know.
So that's a huge win. And I would say, I think it lends into my next question for you, is like, what controversy or controversial advice have you received? I think going through being a first-time entrepreneur, and then also going through a funding round, like I said, not easy at all. There's like your work life, and then there's your funding life, and then there's your personal life. And they all require a whole bunch of time. But I would love to kind of understand, like, what was something you received as advice, but like really wasn't right, or it was just controversial? Like, what was that for you?
I mean, I guess it goes back to when we were starting this company. I received calls from, I think, 36 different private equity firms who were wanting to do something kind of similar, like, rolling up different home services companies. It's a popular, idea. We think ours was a little bit more unique. Nobody has really been investing in this space. No one had been really working at this angle. It was going to be a little trickier. And again, we didn't want to necessarily just sell the whole concept to one firm. We wanted to own it ourselves. And so, the headhunters and the recruiters were all saying, having come out of being a CEO for a private equity-backed company, you should go for that next kind of CEO role. Safer, you have the 4 kids. Think of the children, the poor children. Who's going to cook for them? No. So, take on that next, role and show that track record and, 3% equity. Now you can get 5% equity. That's a lot of cash. And, I feel like you at some point you kind of, there's logic and there's kind of listening to, those 36 people and all the headhunters and friends and stuff who tell you what's like the smart, logical thing to do. And then there's a little bit of, your gut. And my co-founder, again, who I've built a lot of trust with, and my husband, who was very supportive of me going out on my own, in a way was like I was living out his dream. He's always wanted to do his own thing as well. And he's always been wildly supportive of me. But when my co-founder and I were building out the idea, it was Dion who said, you were really onto something. I think it's time for you to put all this other, searching like for another job aside. Like, why are you wasting your time with that when you could be working on this full time? And I was like, well, I need like, salary. This is cute and fun, but like, I need like a real thing. And he was like, well, what if we were able to find some search funding so we can make it a real thing? And I was like, oh, okay. Why don't I do that? And sure enough, we were able to, get some search funding. And then I continued to work on that. And we found some wonderful investors and just working on something full time, on something that I cared very much about, and putting together an amazing team and, one thing led to another. And here we are working on something where I'm like, why did I hesitate for 1 second? Yeah. And I think as a woman, with kids, and you said something earlier about lifestyle, flexibility, and owning your own. And you're so right. That to me, and again, for me, it wouldn't have worked at any other time in my career except for right now. I have a huge, wonderful network that I've kind of curated over time. I, invested in business school, and I worked really hard at all the different companies that I went to and stuff. So, it just didn't like happen, it's not like I created something or invented something. I've done it now a couple of times. I've run this playbook before. So I was really well prepared, more prepared than for anything ever in my life. Plus I have a co-founder and we can bounce ideas off of each other. But gosh, what freedom, and what fun. And, it just doesn't even feel like work.
And I think what you said with the kids, right? Yeah. Like, honestly, being an entrepreneur, like my kids are so involved in the successes we have that it's almost like a little bit of their identity too, which I think which is the opposite side of entrepreneurship, or even just being a working mom, right? Sharing in those successes with your kids, they understand how hard it is and how much you're doing, that when you have a success and you bring it home, or they're in the car and you land a new client and you're excited, like they're excited with you. Like we don't talk about that a lot. I have a staffing company and my son jokes and he's like, I think I know more about your job and what you actually do than some of your clients do. Yeah. Quite possibly. But like those successes, I think it pours into their identities eventually, of, oh, my mom took this big risk, I can do that too.
So it's about the risk, right? So I think most of us don't make whatever leap it is we're trying to make, whether that's going out to entrepreneurship, going on your own, not going to a new job. The reality is it all boils down to risk, right? And I think back to what you said of evaluating the season and time in your career, like it's it's not always the right time to take a risk. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And we're each
Yeah.
responsible to kind of evaluate that. But Jordan, I love what you said with regards to like our kids watching that. So they're not just watching our successes. They should also be watching our failures, and that we should be open and transparent. If they're on the journey, they're not just on the highs, right? They're on the lows too. And I think this helps prepare them, honestly, for like the real world, right? First of all, you don't succeed until you fail first, right? In some way, shape, or form. So failure isn't this big no. It's like, okay, you fail and then you get up and figure out, what do I need to do? Like, you wouldn't have been able to build your playbook without some failures, right? And so it's the risk. Like, when we take the risk, now I will say, I feel like we overanalyze, which causes paralysis. That's what we do as women. The reason we don't take a lot of risk mostly is that we're taking so long to think about it that it paralyzes us. The fears of everything that could happen and could go wrong, but like we never stop to think about all the amazing things on the other side. And I've never heard an entrepreneur that says they wishes they could go back to the other side. So, totally. I mean, just kudos to you for doing that. Do you have any like powerful communities you're plugged into, books, podcasts? Like, what networks and support really help you thrive as a woman in your space?
Well, I think podcasts, I mean, I listen to like I just like to laugh. And so I listen to like Smartless, and I listen to Amy Poehler's new podcast, which as a woman, she is an actual like total feminist. I love what she says about motherhood and like, I don't know anything about Hollywood, but power in Hollywood. I read books for fun, but I'll also read books about, actually, I'm propping up my laptop. I'm reading Careless People right now, which is by Sarah Wynne Williams. It's about Facebook and all of the it's like a tell-all book about Facebook. And so that's been super interesting. It's like, okay, if I built this company, what not to do? It kind of bashes the whole idea of, building fast and breaking things, or whatever the Mark Zuckerberg comment is. So I think having outlets to laugh. And so to that end, it's, I've got really great high school friends and college friends and mom friends who I, definitely connect with and who support me, but also who like don't care that I'm like what I'm doing career-wise, you know what I mean? Like sometimes they're not on LinkedIn. They do not care what's happening. Not all of them. Some are really talented career women, but even if they are, they love me and for the connections that we have or for our kids, and less for that. Business-wise, our investors have been a wonderful network for us. And so I think that's been a surprise and different from probably any other kind of work dynamic I've had before, where I feel like I can be open and honest and share what's going on and get advice. And then my colleagues from past, working situations, back to Goldman Sachs, especially, which is a long time ago, ancient history, but, friends from Goldman have invested in Daisy, and I still stay in touch and ask questions. And then business school, I don't know what the temperature is on business school these days, but I think that's an awesome actually thing for women to do who wanted or are thinking about going into business, just because, especially for people like me who went to a liberal arts school or didn't necessarily know at the age of 18 or 19 that they wanted a career in business. So I just think it's a great way to kind of get the fundamentals, but also that network has been just so helpful to me and just such a nice kind of reset. My husband and I also went to business school together. And so we both kind of were able to start from or restart from the same place. He really understands very well what I'm doing. I understand very well what he's doing. We also understand we have very different skill sets. And so, but just being that network has been incredible to tap into. Darden friends have invested in the company. We've hired some people from Darden. Darden people are customers. It's been incredible, actually. So I do think that is something, unfortunately, probably that women, could use to take a couple years off. That I was able to go on a full ride. There's good scholarships out there to get an enticement to get to go to these schools. So I actually still would encourage women to go and do that. And that's probably some advice I would give to people. So so those are some of the outlets that I reach out to. I try to laugh and enjoy myself. I fly a lot. And so I watch, whatever the latest kind of fun thing is on. I stream a lot of fun TV in the background while I'm typing out emails and decks and things like that.
One more last thing. What would be one piece of advice you would leave our audience with?
I think the advice is to never be kind of satisfied, whether you're at home taking some time off from work, and I'm speaking to women largely, but whether it's, staying at home because you are taking some time off to be with the kids, and then you start to think, okay, well, I'd love to go back, but it's off, it's over. That's just not true. There's so much that you can do in the work world, and whether it's starting something on your own or coming to work for Daisy. I mean, there's tons of roles out there and tons of women leaders that would love to hire other talented women. And then if you're, someone like me who's trying to kind of navigate, different roles within either traditional companies or non-traditional companies, the same thing. I mean, there's ways in which you can say, okay, if I'm not happy somewhere, where will I be happy and who's going to appreciate me? And so just constantly kind of pushing. If you don't have a great mentor, just don't be satisfied with that. Go find someone who's going to, help you and push you and find great things for you so that you can, do something on your own. And then, I think ultimately that'll probably lead you to, doing something like what I'm doing now, which is because ultimately you're going to find that you're the only way to really be truly satisfied is to do things your way and create something on your own terms. And I think this might be the answer for women, honestly, because we're trying to get these companies to change for us. And there's so much broken in terms of, it's not really the company's faults, I mean, there's just, it's just not set up right. Yeah. I mean, we've all, like, even the air conditioner is like set up for men. It's just not set up for women to succeed. It's like set up for us to be uncomfortable. And so just don't be satisfied with that. Just keep pushing until you find, what works for you. And I do think ultimately we'll all figure out that, I got to do this myself. No one's going to make this product the way I want to make it. I'm going to have to make it myself. That's my advice. And I can't believe that's my advice because the Hagan from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I never would have been that bold to think that I could do that. But now I do. I think that might be the answer for women.
Well, that's amazing because you realize, anytime, if you can't look back to 5 years ago and be like, oh my gosh, I never would have, or fill in the blank, right? I think that's where you get to see the growth, and that's the beauty in it. I hate the end of our shows, so I feel like I could just sit here and talk all day about this. But Hagan, thank you for joining us today. Thank you. I know your schedule is super busy, so thank you for taking time out with us and our audience and just being with us. And to our listeners, thank you as always for listening in, for continuing to follow us and just really delve into the topics that we're bringing, as well as the amazing, incredible leaders that have come along the journey with us. So thank you for your time. And Jordan,
subscribe, follow, all the things.
See you guys soon.
Bye.
Well, that's a wrap. Another episode of Women in Tech, Trailblazers podcast. Thanks for tuning in and sharing this time with us. If you liked what you heard, please share this episode with your friends in tech. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Your support helps us keep bringing in inspiring guests and uncovering topics that matter to you. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and making your mark in the tech world. Goodbye for now.